Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 189, recorded on February 15th, 2012. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
We've already had a lot of run-up time for today's episode, so we're already a little bit into our groove. I want the three of you to know, the three of you on the show with me, that you were in my thoughts on Valentine's Day. How's that make you feel?
Ah,
That
Very.
good, huh? Yeah. Huh?
I'm a
Yeah.
little creeped out. Or
By the way,
glad.
I'd like to compliment, if you're watching the video version, Jeremy has the best-looking video of all four of us. It must be
Best.
the Canadian.
So now you're calling me cute.
it's
Canadian
the
packets.
best
Definitely
looking
worried here,
video.
Ryan.
I said best looking video. The problem with Canadian packets is obviously the high tax rate, but quality
Yeah.
of service seems to be pretty high. So let's get started. We've got a week's worth of stuff to jump through. Obviously, the big news of the week was the release of another new GPU from AMD, the Radeon HD 7770 and HD 7750, also known as the Cape Verde GPU. Now, Cape Verde, you remember, we've already seen the 7970 and 7950. And while you might think, well, it would make a lot of sense if we jump down to the 7800 series, which they've already discussed. We already know it's going to be coming out. It's the Pitcairn GPU is the code name for that. Well, they decided to skip the 78 and go straight to the 7700 series, and we have the 7770 and 7750. Now, these are 1.5 billion transistor GPUs. The full GPU on the 7770 has 640 stream processors. The 7750 has 512 stream processors. They both have a 128-bit memory bus. They both have a gigabyte of memory. So that's kind of gives you an idea of where we're at in terms of performance and specs. Keep in mind that the 7970 has 2048 stream processors. So you're talking about around a quarter to 30% of the processing power, raw processing power available on these new parts. Now, the pricing, of course, scales accordingly as well. The 7770 is supposed to be a $169 card, and the 7750 about $109. And I actually have the reference cards here. So this is the 7770. I guess I'll go ahead and say it, the gigahertz edition, which we'll talk about that in a second. The base clock speed of this GPU is 1 gigahertz, as the name might imply, although add-in card vendors are going even higher than that. It has a similar output configuration, as you can see maybe there. Dual-link DVI, HDMI, 2 mini display ports, two slot card. It only requires a single PCIe by 6 power connection, which is nice. And, it's kind of right on the realm of not even needing that. The kind of power consumption numbers that AMD claims was about 80 watts. And we know we get about 75 watts from the PCI Express interface. But obviously with overclocking and making sure all their bases were covered, they did include the single output here, but it runs incredibly efficient. And also, you'll notice there's only one one Crossfire connector up here, so you'll only be able to pair 2 of these in multi-GPU configurations if you want to do that. It's interesting to note that previous, like the 6700 and the 5700, did have 2 of those connectors, so you could use more of those if you wanted to. The 7750, on the other hand, is a much smaller card. It looks kind of like a home theater PC type design. It's a single slot card. It does have a dual-link DVI, full-size HDMI, and a full-size DisplayPort on this, although, of course, add-in card vendors can modify these things however they want. Notice that there is no Crossfire connector at all on this card. And it's a single slot design, and it's got one of those heat sinks and fans on it that you can tell just by looking at it that it's going to be kind of loud. And it was much louder than the cooler on this. It's kind of unfortunate. The power consumption levels on this are really impressive, though. Notice there is no power connector on it at all. It doesn't require any kind of external power. Uses about 55 watts under full load, under full gaming load, which is actually really, really impressive when we talk about the performance numbers. You'll be able to play almost, maybe not all games, but you'll be able to play most games. Battlefield 3 at medium settings at 1080p resolution on this card. pretty well without requiring any external power. It's pretty interesting. You can see in the picture that we're showing right now the GPU itself. It is rather small. It's built on the 28 nanometer process technology. The AMD now has 4 cards out using that process technology, and NVIDIA hasn't got to get the first one out the door. 1.5 billion transistors at 28 nanometers. It's I think it's 123 square millimeters. Josh, do you know how that compares to anything from NVIDIA, like the 560 offhand, or am I putting you on the spot?
I think 560 is still pretty big. It's in the 200 millimeter plus range. Yeah. It's big.
Yeah, and this, it's impressive to look at. Oh, I guess I should say the base clock speed on the 7750 is 800 megahertz, so it does run noticeably slower. So, looking at the performance numbers, what I wanted to mention real quick before I have a couple of retail cards I want to show as well is the 7770 to $160, $159, $169, $159, I guess, has some stiff competition in that price market. When the 7900 cards came out, there wasn't a lot of competition in those price ranges. The 580, it's pretty much it from NVIDIA, right? So they had some room there. Their cards could kind of shine in their specific location. When you start getting into the sub $200 range, as Josh and I and everybody really talks about all the time, there's a ton of cards and a ton of great cards at those price ranges. The 7770 goes straight up against the Radeon 6850, which is the Bart's design, which is something it was also basically the same GPU in the 5000 series. And it also kind of fits right in between the NVIDIA GTX 560, the non-TI version, just the base 560, and the 550 Ti. So what kind of happens compared to the NVIDIA cards is that it's faster than a 550 Ti by about 20%, but it's slower than a GTX 560 by about 20%. And both of these cards kind of sandwich it at a $30 interval. So you can get a base 560 for like $189, and you can get a GTX 550 Ti for $139, $129, something like that. So the 7770 doesn't really stand out against any of the NVIDIA cards. It's kind of in its own niche part there. But what's, I think, maybe more disappointing is that compared to the 6850, the 6850 does outperform the 7770. And it does so at the exact same price, actually a little bit lower if you can find them with rebates. I tend to not count rebate prices, but if you want to, you can get a 6850 for less than a 7770. And what's actually even worse is you can get a Radeon HD 6870 for the same price as the 7770 if you count rebates, which is kind of, I don't want to say it's unfortunate. It's just kind of AMD needs to get this stuff out of the market. They like to call us and kind of cold call us and see what our thoughts are as the review process is going on. And I told them this is like, look, it's as it stands now, I'm going to recommend people, if you want an AMD graphics card, you're not getting a whole lot of new features with the Southern Islands architecture that you are missing on the Bart's architecture. And you can get better performance for the same or lower price, even staying inside the AMD ecosystem, the AMD drivers and Eyefinity support and Crossfire support and all that kind of stuff. And their response was, well, Bart's is going to be going away soon, and I understand that. But if you look at you can still find 5000 series cards out there. You can still find 5770s. You can still find 5870s and 5850s. These cards have a longer shelf life than I think AMD wants to admit or wants to believe. So once Bart's is gone, once the 6800 series cards are gone, this will be the best card in that price range, and we'll also likely see the prices come down 10 or 20 bucks or so, which will make it a more
palatable.
Yeah, exactly. More attractive offering. So that's the 7770. I think it's a good card, but if you're going to buy an AMD card today, like what do you get with this? You get lower power consumption, better power efficiency, it runs a little cooler, runs a little quieter, but you don't get any performance benefits. And you get DX 11.1 support. You get PCI Express 3.0.
Don't they have that kind of video encoder built in that people are getting somewhat excited about, but it's still not active yet because of software?
You're talking about like UVD, like an updated version of UDV?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe it's just not a feature that really compels to me, and I don't think a lot of consumers, kind of mainstream gamers are really. I don't know. Video encode and decode at this point is so easily done by any level of graphics card. I don't really feel like that's a thing to really to base your decision on. Now, I will say that the 7750 is in a much better position. It's $109 compared to, and it actually outperforms the GTX 550 Ti, or it kind of comes right at about that area, which is about $20 more. And it blows away the GTS 450 from NVIDIA as well in terms of performance, which is priced at $109. So if we directly compare this to the NVIDIA card of the same price, this is by far the best option. And it also beats the Radeon HD 5770 or 6770. They're essentially the same part. That is also available for the same price. So the 7750 is actually the better of these two cards in terms of its its position in the market, its price performance ratio, and that kind of stuff. Plus, it uses like no external power. This one's not extremely quiet because of the fan, but we're hoping some of the retail models will be a little better. Anybody have any thoughts on kind of the Cape Verde launch in general, on the whole pricing scheme and stuff?
I think that AMD was trying to kind of do another 5770 type release, and that when the 5770 came out, it was a little bit slower than the HD 4870 and 4850s, but not by much.
Yep.
I mean, they both had 800 stream processors. A lot of the basic specifications were the same. We had, pretty decent still bandwidth in terms of memory because of the GDDR5. But that was going from a DirectX 10 to a DirectX 11 part, and the 5770 could do DX10 and DX11 stuff pretty well. I mean, not fantastic, but it was a big step up from previous generations of mid-range cards where you just had to go to DX9 to have good performance. This allowed you to do nice looking stuff, and it didn't hammer you into the well. But this is not the same. I mean, sure, you get a lot better performance per watt on these products, and that's about it. You don't get any extra features. Yep. It's not a big jump up to DirectX 11 as compared to, say, hey, I've got this old 4870. If I go a 5770, I won't be losing any performance, but I'll be gaining DirectX 11. You're not seeing any of this. And so, people are going to be taking a look around and say, hey, this isn't as impressive as I thought. This HD 6850 or 6870 is going to give me as good performance, if not better. And I'm not going to lose out on anything except on my power bill, which an extra 25 watts is not going to break the bank.
I did get a couple of retail cards of the 7770 as well. This is an MSI card. This is kind of their base model, though. This runs at 1020 megahertz, so you get a whole 20 megahertz overclock. But it does run pretty quiet and cool and that kind of stuff. It's got the same output configuration. The XFX card that we got in, actually here, which I do like the design of, and they keep kind of red-black color scheme on it as well, runs fairly quiet but doesn't run very cool in my testing. But this card is actually running at 1120 megahertz. So this actually is a 11% increase in the clock speed, which was actually pretty impressive. It helped close the gap on the GTX 560. It wasn't able to bring it up on par or anything like that. And you can pick this one up for about like $179, so it's only like a $20 premium for this XFX model, which is actually pretty nice. And I think the MSI card is the base price of $159 as well. So there are retail models coming out. I will just say my last little comment on Cape Verde is with that Gigahertz edition moniker. Just bugs piss out of me. They had this call even before where they briefed us on the 7700 and 7750. They had this call to kind of introduce some of these reviewers to the idea of the Gigahertz moniker. And I just kind of sat there listening on this conference call, like, what are they doing? This is the same company that spent a large portion of its life convincing media and convincing consumers that clock speed didn't matter. What matters is performance, what real world performance you get. You know, when we're talking about the Pentium 4 clock speeds versus the Athlon clock speed, it was a long time ago, but it did happen. And it's like, I guess it's possible that everybody that was at the company at that time has been fired and nobody remembers that. But you know, they're doing the exact same thing here by trying to apply this gigahertz edition to the 7700. And I said, well, are you going to release a 7700 that or 7770 that doesn't have a 1 gigahertz clock speed? And they said no, they had no plans for that. So every 7770 is going to be a gigahertz or higher clock speed, since that's the reference design. So it seems like an unnecessary
Marketing,
yeah, and it's
scheme, yeah.
Yeah, and it just seems so disingenuous because of the history of AMD as a company, because that they're always trying to say they're taking the higher road, that they're not doing proprietary things, they want to do open 3D, they want to do open all this other kind of stuff. It just kind of came at me and was like, it just seemed unnecessary. Obviously, their goal is to convince people that do not know a lot about graphics technology or PC technology that, hey, this one's at a higher clock speed, this one's got a higher number on it, so it's got to be better, which will probably work for a certain percentage of people that go into Fry's and Micro Center, which I guess is the end goal.
Yeah.
But it just aggravates me a little bit, because now I have to sit here on this podcast and explain it, and I had to spend several paragraphs on the review explaining it when I thought we were done explaining this. Just like I feel we don't have to explain why, because the 7970 has 2048 stream processors in it, and the NVIDIA GTX 580 has 512 CUDA processors in it. That doesn't mean anything until you actually put it all in context, test things, see how performance runs, combination of IPC and clock speed. That's all computing is. So it's just kind of annoying. So
I can't disagree with that at all. But before you do run on, I've got one question that I would like to ask you.
sure.
Do you think that AMD, specifically because they're first out of the gate and NVIDIA is going to be coming up on this, are now facing an entirely new market segment? Before, you would fork out the most money for a graphics card, buy the absolute top of the line, because that was the only thing that could play your game. Now, if you're buying a 7900 series and you're playing on a 1080p or less monitor, you're essentially tossing your money away. You're never going to see it start to choke, except in very certain circumstances or in driver related, which is a totally different argument. So now they're trying to sell Tahiti to people who either have a 30-inch monitor or multiple monitors, which is even more extreme than what the extreme end used to be. Whereas you've got Pitcairn, which we're going to see sooner or later, which is probably going to be, absolutely brilliant on a single monitor. So where does that leave your third stringers? You've got to go for like a totally new market segment now, where you're sort of providing the same performance you saw the last generation, but smaller, because that thing is so skinny, and using less power and producing less heat.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that they're really seeing a new market segment that they have to try and break into to convince people that, hey, Eyefinity isn't a fancy little thing. You need it. You have to have it. If you want a 79.7.
Yeah,
So
I mean, since the introduction of Eyefinity, yes, I think that's the case. And the same thing with NVIDIA's 3D Vision, that they're trying to create these new, gaming paradigms, these new gaming situations, configurations, in order to be able to provide more power to answer them. Because you're right, a 1080p screen, the HD 7770 does pretty good. You can't play Battlefield 3 on ultra settings. You can't even really play it on high settings. You can play it on medium settings pretty well at 1080p, though. And that's the worst case scenario that we're really coming across. But I will never, very rarely, I won't say never, but hopefully not anytime soon, will you see me complaining about getting extra power out there, because there's always more things to do. And I believe we are at the point in a cycle where we'll see a tipping point and where software will start to really push things again. So, hopefully.
Because we're almost to a next generation of consoles.
Right.
In about a year.
True.
That helps. All right, so let's move away from that for now, and We don't have Scott on the podcast with us. We should have actually had him on here. We'll probably do that soon because we're getting some more keyboards in. I don't think he knows this yet. If he's listening, we'll know now for review. Scott did a fantastic review of keyboards, of all things. And you'd think, keyboard's a keyboard. But he looked at 4 different mechanical keyboards from Rosewill, who is the, I guess we could call it the house brand of Newegg. They make cases and power supplies and all that kind of stuff. And they make LED lamps. They make a lot of stuff. But I believe,
Coffee
is that right, Josh?
makers,
They're owned by
humidifiers.
Blood
Rosewill?
pressure monitor.
Yeah.
No, but they do make, like sound bars for TVs, cases.
Oh, God.
Networking gear. Induction hot plates.
Oh,
Kind of a
And-
growing industry.
And mechanical keyboards. So if I highly encourage you, if you're curious about mechanical keyboards, if you're curious about these specific mechanical keyboards, Scott did a really, really good job of kind of explaining these things. He did a great video review. If you go to I believe it's the 3rd page, he has created animations that properly describe and show the difference between a Cherry MX Blue, MX Brown, MX Black, and MX Red keyboard key. And they're really, really well done. Great explanations of the benefits, the pros and cons to each. So if you go down here, you can see what he's able to do. In the video, he has noise tests where he'll type on all 4 of them. Actually, I think there's 5 different mechanical keyboards there, so that you can
at the same time.
Yeah,
I think he's actually pumping oil with those, but I could be wrong.
And he says,
I mean, great
six
animations.
keyboards at once.
yeah. So you get an idea of which ones are the loudest, which ones are not, and it's a really, really, really well done article on keyboards of all things. And it's one of those kind of segments that's getting more attention now. Remember when power supplies were like the hot new thing and everybody was making power supplies? I feel like kind of keyboards, we went through like speakers and headsets are currently in that field now. And so we're like keyboards and mice kind of coming back in there. People try to figure out ways to get consumers to spend their money. So check out that review of the Rosewill 2nd generation mechanical keyboards. There he is. Your very own
Scott Michaud.
Scott Michaud. He's
Michaud.
in the chat room as Faux Pojijo.
Fopo Jibijo.
Yeah. Go. Somebody was going to get it eventually. So he does a great job. Check that out. And then we also had a review posted. Matt Smith, who's our mobile guy, those are notebooks and some of our cell phones and that kind of stuff, tablets, posted a review of the Asus Transformer Prime TF201 keyboard dock. So we already did a review of the Asus Transformer Prime tablet. We didn't have the keyboard dock in yet, so we did a separate piece on this. Talks about the pros and cons of using it compared to using a laptop, where it actually works surprisingly well, where it doesn't work in terms of being an actual productivity device, and then what it does for your battery life as well. The Transformer Prime is still the best Android-based tablet out there, and I'm really excited about the new model. It's going to come out with the 19 by 12 screen. I will probably finally pick one up for myself when those are released. So, but if
He
you're
didn't
interested,
seem too happy.
It's called an iPad 3, right? What?
no,
He didn't
no.
seem too happy about the keyboard or just the experience in general, just trying to use it for productivity.
I
think.
had that same experience when I had the first Asus Transformer for a little while. It seems a little kind of, I don't want to say gimmicky, but it's like its novelty wears off fairly soon. The touchpad is not very responsive. It's not what you're used to. You're not used to single clicking on things. You're not, the productivity apps aren't really aren't there to take advantage of a keyboard touchpad combination thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's-
just think, Ryan, how cool that keyboard edition is when you touch it. I mean, it doesn't heat up at all.
That's right. As Josh noted at CES, the bottom of that laptop tablet doesn't even get hot, especially because the
Not
processor
hot.
is not in the bottom of it. It was embarrassing for you, Josh. It was embarrassing. I was
It
embarrassed.
was. It was a low point in my entire tech career. Look how cool this is. The processor's up at the tablet part. Oh, jeez.
Way to go, Rodney.
And that's why we knew Josh needed some more experience in the mobile world.
Yeah.
So let's take a quick break here. Thank today's podcast sponsor. Before we get back, talk about a few news items and a couple of emails as well. We'll be right back. All right, thank you, MSI, for that. Let's talk about some news. We wanted Windows 8 on ARM details. We got them. Jeremy, what are the details that we got about Windows 8 on ARM? Was it good news or bad news, or what we expected or what we didn't expect?
Whoa. Because it's WOA, you know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that's a full rainbow all the way.
No, but it's a double processor. We are finally prying apart Microsoft's tight lips about what exactly is going on with Windows on ARM, because, well, they've been saying, yes, we're going to have it. It will exist, and it's coming out, and it's great. So it's taken them a while, but we're finally starting to get some information, such as the fact that, as you might have expected, it is going to be very, very tightly controlled by Microsoft. It's working. They've had a stable build for 2 weeks now, but anything that's being run on it is coming to you through Windows Update. It's gone through Windows Hardware Quality Labs. It is not something you're just going to be able to throw your latest, greatest apps on. It's going to be dependent on Microsoft. It's got interesting things to it that's going to take it a little bit above a lot of the Android operating systems, because it's got something they're calling Office 15, which is going to be, you know, completely compatible Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote, because everyone uses OneNote. It's going to be perhaps not as pretty as you're used to, because you're running it on an ARM. It's sucking no energy. This thing will be going for weeks without needing to be recharged. It's going to be pre-installed, and like I say, it's going to be locked down pretty bad, but at the same time, you're looking at a tablet device running Windows 8, running essentially almost the same apps you saw on if you did download the preview version of Windows 8. And it's going to have an Office-compatible piece of software on it, which is probably making BlackBerry executives cry even more than than they were previously. So by the end of the month, we should be seeing an open beta. I doubt that most of you actually have hardware to run this on, because our ARM chips tend to be embedded in something. But if you really want to reverse engineer your fridge to run Windows 8, I would love to see a video of it, because it would be hilarious. And that's pretty much what we know.
All right. Well, I mean, that's not what I was hoping for, to be perfectly honest with you.
You know what I see this opening the door for, though? Since if they can compile it, run it on ARM, and I'm speaking to all the specific, just the Windows components, internals itself,
Yeah.
right? What I see is NAS, network attached type devices running Windows 8, server-ish, storage server, whatever you want to call it, flavor, on an ARM using the storage spaces, which is where you can have your storage pool. It basically is sort of like Drobo, except Windows is able to do this with Windows 8, right?
Well, and they're talking about putting out the next version of Server with the GUI disabled by default. There won't even be a GUI on the next server. You can enable one and get it to run, but by default, they're not going to even have it. So, hey, ARM's not got a problem.
Yep. But an ARM would be enough CPU power to do parity calculations, the simple XOR parity that you do for anything that's like a RAID-ish kind of a thing. So, yeah, you could basically have the ARM doing all the legwork for a very huge RAID that would just sip power. One drive would take more power than the entire, processing end of that system. That would be pretty sweet.
And for all that Microsoft wants to lock down the front end, the software, ARM is famous for being happy to jump in bed with anybody. So hardware level hacking could be interesting.
Interesting. All right. Well, something else that could be interesting is Haswell. It's the next kind of major architecture shift for Intel, and it looks like we saw this is what's coming out after Ivy Bridge. Ivy Bridge is essentially very similar on the CPU side to Sandy Bridge, with a few minor changes, but a lot of changes to the GPU side. Haswell is completely different architecture. This is kind of I think this is where you'll see Intel really try to push the same architecture into as many different segments as possible, down from, even down to like tablets, maybe even in high-end cell phones and that kind of stuff, all the way up through, premium PCs and laptops. Obviously in different variants, but the same base architecture. So a leaked roadmap came out that shows Haswell coming out in the first half of 2013. Is this in line with where we expected it earlier, or is this somewhat of a new development? You might know.
It's where we expected it with their TikTok strategy. I mean, the tick is a new process node. Talk is, speaking out loud.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, Talk is a new architecture based on the new process node, but they've worked out all kinks on the process node so they can introduce a new architecture. But anyway, yeah, Haswell is not unexpected in that time frame.
Does it seem? It seems odd to me. If you look at the roadmap, Ivy Bridge will apparently only exist for 3 quarters, Q2, 3, and 4 of 2012. If this leaked roadmap is correct, it's only going to exist for 3 quarters, which is disappointing. It's also going to be the last LGA 1155 part. Haswell will use the LGA 1150 socket, so we'll
keep losing a pin somewhere.
Yeah. But look at that Sandy Bridge E.
Has got a little pair of pliers and is just pulling pins out of these sticking.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. That's an interesting comment, though, Jeremy. If you look at the top, the
Sandy Bridge E just keeps going and going and going. Socket 2011, that little one-off half a server chip is going to be alive in 2003.
That's what's interesting. And they're not listing specific processors, but they are listing greater than or equal to i7-3960X. So it sounds like they haven't even really decided if they're going to make processors faster than the 3960X. I'm imagining that they will.
Why?
But, well...
Who's going to challenge them?
I know.
Well, we want them to, but who's going to force them to?
And this may be...
okay, Intel is looking ahead, believe it or not. Because eventually, and they see the writing on the wall, we're going to have heterogeneous computing. I mean, it just is going to happen.
Sure.
Intel has kind of tried to push away from it, but with NVIDIA and AMD really trying to push it, and a lot of pretty good work through third-party software manufacturers and designers and developers, it's going to happen because you have all this die space, and it's just doing graphics. And, I mean, even Intel says, hey, we have to sell a chip. It's going to have to do 3D graphics for people who want to do even casual gaming. And, I mean, they have expectations on how nice that casual gaming is going to look. And so they're losing die space to CPU because they have to do it to the GPU. And so eventually they're going to go with these high-end processors that still have a GPU attached to them. And they're going to eventually, and even though they're slowly doing it and they're kind of pushing it back, they're going to go to heterogeneous computing because it's where it's all going. I mean, people see these graphics processors that you can get for cheap,
and
they can just do teraflops of
Mm-hmm.
computing. So, I'm sorry, what did you say again?
I was just saying that explains why the focus is on getting through Ivy Bridge, getting to Haswell, and improving that hardware availability for them. Is that they think that will enable them to improve their GPU side, improve their streaming processing side, and kind of catch up. So,
and I mean,
but they're
it's kind of
targeted
interesting because it mirrors what AMD is doing because AM3 Plus is dying socket. We have like one more pile driver core for AM3 Plus. It doesn't have a GPU on it, but after that, there's absolutely nothing. I think it's all going to go towards, not Trinity, but rather the pile driver, and those are going to be the high-end products. And they're hoping at that time that software will improve to really be able to leverage the power of these built-in GPUs on these processors, and they're very, very tightly knit. And like last week's NC State news item, with how they're able to, through software development, to leverage the GPU portions a lot easier and actually have the CPU do a whole lot of prefetching for it. We're going to see more and more of this over the next 2 years. So yeah, it's writing on the wall.
Yeah, and the other thing is that they've got to focus on the lower end. They've got to focus on efficiency and power because, as we were just talking about, hey, guess what? ARM runs Windows now. ARM is headed into your server closet. ARM has got to work on their processing power. They don't have to work on that low wattage. They don't have to work on efficiency. AMD and Intel, on the other hand, are coming at it from the other way. They've got the power, but it generates a lot of heat, sucks a lot of electricity, and you can't make it as dense as you can the ARM processors. So I think almost they're more driving at efficiency nowadays, as opposed to the higher end.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Ivy Bridge out. There we go. Haswell coming 2013. I guess we should have covered this earlier. This might be a little bit inside baseball. Maybe a lot of our listeners may not have a vested interest in the personnel at these specific companies, but I did post a news post on the departure from AMD of Eric Dimmers, or Dimmers. Sorry, Eric. So he was the CTO of the graphics division at AMD since 2009, and he actually been at ATI since 2000. He kind of came in with the Dave Orton group of people.
Yeah, and he was the chief architect of the what turned into the Radeon 9700 series, which was an absolutely fantastic chip for the time.
That, I believe, was the first video card we ever reviewed at PC. At that point, it was AMDMB.com. I think the Radeon 9700 was that card. So Eric hadn't been down in the nitty-gritty of actually architecting GPUs in quite a while, but he was responsible for kind of setting the direction and the tone of the company and all those types of things. And, I knew him very well, had dinner and meetings with him quite a few times, and really sad to see him go because he had a very good ability to explain these complex topics and break it down to people like myself who don't have the background and explain why one method is better than another. And he was also one of the few people in the industry that was upfront and honest with you about what the competition was doing, what the competition was doing well, and what his own company might have been lacking behind it, and then telling you how they were going to fix it and that kind of stuff.
And he was a great communicator all around, because here I was, before I joined PC Per, and I would email him, and he'd email me back with really thought-out, detailed explanations of what all was going on, and he would correct me on crap, because back then I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, but I could, BS it really well.
Certainly changed a lot.
He was a good guy to work with, because he was very honest with you, really straightforward, and he just knew his stuff so well he could explain it to simpletons like you or me.
At least like you. The people at AMD told me that this was not, he didn't leave because of a disagreement in the direction of the company. He didn't leave because he had any kind of internal pressure or any kind of disagreements with the new CTOs and the new CEO and all that kind of stuff, which we were just introduced to at an analyst day like last week. So if that's the case, he is leaving to go to a different company. It is not Intel or NVIDIA. I was assured of that. It was not Intel or NVIDIA. And although nobody would say officially, there was a rumor going around that was posted at The Verge that he was going to Qualcomm, which is interesting as they are the largest SoC vendor on the planet. And it seems like a great area for somebody like him who has this kind of graphics background. And you look at a company like Qualcomm that's looking at competition from AMD and NVIDIA on that SoC front, and
Intel.
Yeah, and Intel. So they're obviously looking to maintain their position in the SoC world, and I think if that turns out to be true, that will be a good pickup for them. So we wish him all the luck, and I don't think we have to worry about AMD's graphic strategy necessarily changing with this departure, but I don't think anybody can say that the company's better off without him either. So OCZ launched the Z Drive R4 Cloud Serve 16 terabyte solid state storage system. Alan, can we get one of these for our video editing rig, do you think?
Don't I wish? First of all, yes, the capacity is up to 16 terabytes, but everybody keeps sort of jumping on that and realize right now you can only buy one if you had the money in a capacity up to 6.4 terabytes.
How much money?
Actually, I haven't priced it.
Say
They're not
$12,000.
saying yet.
It's going to be high. The R4 that we reviewed, which was the 1.6 terabyte model, was like $3 or $4 grand easy. So quadruple that.
What makes this cloud serve? Like, why is this what they showed us at CES before?
Okay, so they showed this to us at CES, but the cloud serve thing, I think my take on it is it's a little bit of added branding, which I'll get to in just a sec. But for this, is basically this is a R4 that instead of like the R4 that we reviewed that had 8 SandForce in parallel at 6 gigabit each and PCI Express 2.0 by 8. This card is basically just double all of that stuff across the board. So it's the Superscale processor. It actually has 2 of them in it instead of 1, which the R4 we reviewed had. It has 16 SandForce in parallel. So this is basically 16 SandForce 6 gigabit SSDs all operating in parallel. And it's PCI Express 2.0 by 16. So if you look at this card, it actually has the same connector as a video card, as a high-end video card. And it's also the same size as a high-end video card.
Good.
And the look I got at it at CES, it was like it was quad stacked PCBs in there, where the R4 that we reviewed was double stacked, right? So they need a lot of PCB space to fit all those controllers, all that flash memory. Rating 1.4 million IOs per second. You're probably bottlenecked by the system you plug it into, to be honest. Now, where the cloud serve part of this comes into play is the other thing that OCZ is starting to push, which is they acquired a company. I'm trying to remember what the name of the company was, but we looked at an interesting demo that they put on for us during CES that showed they basically took an R4. It wasn't even the cloud serve version then. It was just the standard R4, just like the one we reviewed. They had it in a storage server, and with this software solution, they were able to virtualize the R4. So instead of showing up as just a drive to the operating system, it was able to show up as a network-attached storage device instead, like a really fast one. And then they were able to take that, bridge that across into VMware, and so you had this really fast cache, basically, effectively caching all of the virtual machines that were connected in that cluster. So that's a very good thing to have, technology-wise. Like this is just like a plug-in solution. You have a rack full of, an entire cluster of virtual machine, VMware, servers type stuff, and you have your SAN, which has spinning hard drives in there, which are only so fast for virtual machine operations. You could take one of these cloud serve boards, plug it into one of the machines, install their extra software, their cloud service type software, and then that device is then available to the entire cluster for caching purposes, which, as long as you can fit all of the stuff that's frequently used within that cache, this is sort of like a very large version of hybrid solid state storage, right? You still have your spinning disks. In this case, it's a bunch of them, and it's a really huge spinning disk effectively, right? And you plug in this really huge solid state device capacity wise, and it's basically the same thing as a hybrid drive, just enterprise scale. The really cool thing is that that's the only thing you have to do, right? You don't have to tear down servers. You don't have to rearrange anything. You just the entire cluster just goes way faster just by adding this one device and some software, which is pretty good.
All right. Another interesting, kind of disappointing bit of news that we saw come across. This is a rumor, strictly a rumor, coming from Digitimes that is reporting that apparently Pegatron is the independent spin-off company of Asus, will apparently stop manufacturing Ultrabooks for Asus as early as the end of March. According to Digitimes, Pegatron will give up Ultrabook orders from Asus due to pressure from their new partner, Apple. Apple has not been pleased by the competition and Ultrabooks bring to their MacBook Air lineup with higher-end ultra-thin laptops. Now, what's interesting is that they claim that there was other rumors going on that Pegatron had confirmed that they were going to be the manufacturers of the next iPad, and that perhaps one of the stipulations of that was that they were no longer going to have the capacity to manufacture Ultrabooks for ASUS. So that sucks. We don't really, I mean, this is not, it's kind of more rumor mongering than big tech news, although it does kind of indicate that either one of a couple of things. Apple is actually feeling the pressure from the Ultrabook push by Intel and its partners, or Apple is just more controlling and monopolistic than maybe we had kind of hoped or thought they would be. Now, it's Alan. I know you have one of those ASUS Ultrabooks there with you. They do look amazingly similar to
here's the UX31.
Yeah,
you got a MacBook Air over there?
No, Ken's somewhere else. I mean, they're very similar.
Basically the same
but
thing.
They're the same thing, but it's not like they were filing a copyright claim or a trademark issue, right? They just said, "How about you stop making that?" And this is kind of why we'll see what happens, right? ASUS isn't going to stop making those laptops. They're going to have to find a different source, and we'll see how it goes. If this all turns out to be true, so
if it is true, I mean, doesn't that sort of open Apple up for some? I don't know. Isn't that like anti-competitive something?
Apple has more money than the rest of our government, so
yeah, but that doesn't make it okay to just be like,
yeah, you know, I don't know. It all kind of, if it all happens in China, in Taiwan, who knows how it's going to be kind of construed and brought up here. So, I mean, this is not the first time.
If a netbook is canceled in China, will analysts in New York hear it?
Yeah.
Fall.
Only if Foxconn employees fall, I was about to say.
Yes. So it's not the first time they've done it. It probably won't be the last time they've done it. Obviously, that culture at Apple still survives if this turns out to be true. And if it is true, it's disappointing to the rest of us that don't want MacBook Airs and want competition and want dropping prices and want new things to come out at different points. So that sucks. But let's move on to one last bit of news, a little bit more interesting. Apparently, Moore's Law is going to be continuing into the future again as we see electron beam etching that will take us into 10 nanometer process technology, which is different than the type of lithography that we have today. Who did a little reading on this new electron beam?
I can talk about it a little bit, and Jeremy could perhaps head in. You know, right now we're still at the low end of visible light, and they do some things with light to create interference to then allow it to go to smaller levels than what the actual wavelength of these light sources can do. And then we're going to jump to UV light and ultra low,
extreme
UV,
ultraviolet,
extreme UV, EUV. Yep. And they thought that after EUV, after they get all of these issues solved with that would kind of be the end of it. Well, we do have one more level left that we know of, and that could change in the next 10 to 15 years. But now we have electron beam. Now, electron beams, as far as I know, wavelength is pretty minimal in that it's almost essentially a straight line. The only problem with is because it's not really a light source. You kind of have to etch a bunch of stuff with these UV sources, and it's not something that can go into production anytime soon. However, they have been able to show it off and use it, and it works. But I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done on it. But Moore's Law continues with the doubling of transistor density over 18 months. So we're going to have faster stuff throughout the next 5 or 6 years without any real big issues of where we're going.
Yeah.
That
this
we
was
know
made
of.
with UV. Right there. That stuff. Not X-ray.
And you're so out of focus. Oh, there you go.
I had
So
to macro
nice.
it. Sorry.
In front of the
But
camera.
essentially, I mean, the big hurdle they've got right now with this directed electron beam technology is they can save on price because you don't have to double mask, and masks are bloody expensive. So you double mask it, things get even nastier. More than twice the price because that second mask is even more precise than that first one. But with this, as it stands, they're doing 22 nanometer, which is, you know, what Intel reached with EUV. Problem is, they're putting through one wafer an hour. This is not economically feasible, no matter who you are. Not even Intel. They're looking at hundreds an hour.
Yeah, they're basically dot matrix printing.
Yeah, it's one little teensy tiny little dot, but
We have come full
yeah.
circle, everybody.
So, you know, we're hoping, you know, they're going to scale up to maybe 10 an hour, but still, as far as actually being economically viable, as seeing this actually coming out as a process, it's got a long way to go. This is the first look at it, but this is sort of the first look at something that is going to be a complete game changer as opposed to a refinement of the previous technology, which was squeezing UV light into tinier and tinier and tinier little points. It'll be interesting to see if Mapper and there's actually a lot of people involved in this. You got Mapper Lithography, which is out of the Netherlands, CA Leti, which is out of it's out of Europe somewhere. French Research and Technology Institute, TSMC, STM Microelectronics, Nissan, TOK, Dow Chemical, JSR Micro, Synopsys, Mentor Graphics, Sokudo, Tokyo, not to be forgotten with that little number puzzle, Tokyo Electron, Aceleta Nanographics, and Intel has already got their noses in this as well. So this isn't going to go away. This seems to be what people are betting on. And hopefully it works, because we need smaller and smaller things to go faster and faster and faster.
Well, realize they're potentially making 4 times as many of the same size, same transistor count,
Yeah.
right? Or even more. So even though they're like only going 1/10 the speed, it sort of offsets that a little bit.
It kind of makes you wonder if the silicon industry, with the money being poured into it, will not make larger leaps in quantum mechanics than most governments and high-end, physics-type entities like CERN will do in, the next 30 years. We'll see in the next 5.
Indeed.
I'm talking about
So,
atomic type interactions that these guys will eventually have to get to if they want to increase performance.
Yeah.
I think they're going
somebody-
to start pushing. I think they're going to start pushing more parallel stuff in general. And the only reason I bring that up is because part of that instruction set they're introducing with Haswell has to do with locking memory regions in such a way where you can have multiple threads, multiple processes talking to that memory simultaneously without causing issues, right? Because what needs to happen right now, and like when you write a program, if you have 2 different threads and they're both talking to the same memory space, you have to sort of coordinate it and make it so only one thread talks to that space, so make sure nothing else bothers that. But this Haswell thing is going to have like its own instruction little subset, like an additional set of instructions, SE, that sort of thing. So if you do something like that and you put something like that in place, then they're probably thinking about pushing like hyper-threaded and even like 8+ cores, I would imagine, is the direction they're going to try to go. Because that instruction set, those additions to the instruction set is what enable you to write, to code stuff that takes more advantage of parallelism in CPUs. Like you can have the same kind of task being run and spread that across 6, 8 cores.
All right. Josh, I know we kind of it just happened. Was NVIDIA had their financial kind of, I guess their, what do I call it? quarterly conference call there. Did
Correct.
they have anything interesting to say?
Well, they didn't make as much money this quarter as they're hoping. Next quarter looks even dimmer than what they are, and that's due to a variety of factors. The first is in Q4, the hard drive shortage really took a big chunk out of GPUs and standalone GPUs especially, since NVIDIA has shut down their chipset business and therefore their integrated graphics. They just were not selling as many chips, and basically what the balance was is that these system configurators had price points that they needed for each of these products. And unfortunately, the price of the hard drive, which is one of the most basic parts of the product, has just skyrocketed. It essentially pushed out a standalone GPU, and they had to go with more integrated stuff. And if you're going to do integrated, it's either AMD or Intel. And NVIDIA does not really offer an integrated product anymore, except some of their lower-end Ion stuff. But that has to be attached to some last generation AMD and Intel processors. So it was not something that was sustainable for them or viable. And so they saw a hit because of that. Tegra 2 also started to get winded down a bit with the extra competition from Qualcomm and TI and some of these other parts. Tegra 2 was being cut back quite a bit, and especially when they were starting to offer Tegra 3 parts into a lot of these new SKUs that will be coming out in the next quarter. NVIDIA did not have a great quarter, and they're not expecting Q1 to be very good as well. And another problem with that is they are complaining of 28 nanometer wafer yields. They're lower than they were expected. Kepler is going to be coming out. They're very excited about it, but they have a per wafer agreement with TSMC. And so when you have low yields, your costs are going to be much, much higher because you're going to have fewer good dies on that, even though you're paying on a per wafer deal. It's not in the past where we've seen per good die agreements in between these foundries and the guys who actually design them. I think that these new process jumps are getting more and more expensive than what we have seen in the past. And so, yeah, TSMC, Global Foundries, whoever, they're going on per wafer deals because they're not willing to eat the costs of these new process technologies because they were just losing money hand over fist. So everybody's sharing these issues, and it's going to affect the margins of NVIDIA throughout the first quarter of this year. Last quarter, last year was a decent year for NVIDIA. They grew a bit, even though they had some bumps. Things were pretty good for them. They grew as a company. They have new products. They're very, very excited about the Tegra line. They're excited about the Tesla line. And the professional graphics is another area of good growth for them. But overall, they still have some issues with because they're still relying on 40 nanometer. They're trying to get away from that. They have to go with 28 nanometer, and just yields are not there. It's an expensive process, and it's one of the reasons why we have not seen any Kepler parts come out yet. They really are wanting more and more wafer starts, but they just are not available at this time. They think that eventually by Q3, things will have evened out in terms of yields and wafer starts. So, they're going to see improvements by then, but the next quarter is going to be pretty it's going to be pretty tight for the company.
Yeah. All right. Okay. That is all of our news for this week. We're going to jump into two emails. We're going to do two quick emails. We'll run through them pretty quick. podcast@pcper.com is the email address where you can send us your questions and ideas. And we do have the toll-free number still, 1-888-38-PC-PER. I think we actually got a couple of voicemails this week, but I was busy hanging a switch on hinges. I didn't get a chance to listen to those before the show. So, Alan, why don't you take our first question here from James, who has a question about SSDs and fault sensors and that kind of stuff.
Alrighty, from James. Many laptops have built-in free-fall sensors. What about an SSD? Or what about when an SSD is installed? Does a free-fall sensor help or hurt an SSD in any way? Could a free-fall sensor cause issues by turning off an SSD mid-write? Are free-fall sensors or operating systems smart enough to not do anything if an SSD is installed? So, first of all, the free-fall sensors are installed within the 2.5-inch hard drive itself. So the deal there is if you have an SSD, A, you do not have a free-fall sensor. It's not present at all. And B, solid-state devices are rated for like 1,500 Gs, which is pretty crazy. And there's really no need to have any sort of a free-fall sensor or any need to abort what's going on if you were able to determine that your laptop wasn't free-fall. Because what's going to happen is a write could be going on. You could probably throw your laptop off of a balcony or something and have it hit the ground, and chances are the write would complete and the SSD would probably survive. The rest of your laptop, not so much. Yeah, so it's just not needed.
I've had that exact thing happen. Actually, I threw my Lenovo ThinkPad onto the concrete and took a big chunk out of the magnesium, but everything still worked, including the SSD.
Well, it's Ken's fault for dodging.
If he'd have just caught it with his face, it would have been perfectly fine.
That's what he's there for.
Exactly. Okay. An email from Dave. I'll take this real quick. In a previous reviewer podcast, Ryan mentioned that if all you want to do is 1080p gaming, there is really no point in getting an HD 7950 or 7970, which is something Jeremy brought up earlier as well today. Have you or anyone benchmarked 3D games? Yes. I was looking to upgrade my CPU. I skipped a line. What if I want to do it in a 27-inch, 120 hertz 3D monitor? Does the 7970 or 7950 then make better use of the card? He goes into more details about PCIe 3 motherboards, AMD 8150 processors, and that kind of stuff. Would the 7970 be hindered by his nearly 4-year-old rig that includes a Intel Q9450, 8 gigs of RAM, water-cooled CPU, et cetera, et cetera. It might be held back a little bit, but not too much by the processor on that side of things. Yes. Also, as we mentioned earlier, if you are doing multi-display gaming or you're doing 3D gaming, then yes, taking advantage of higher-powered GPUs like the 7970 and 7950 will be beneficial. With 3D, you're actually rendering twice as many frames to get the same smoothness that you would normally want. So the 120 hertz 3D monitors need to run at 120 hertz or better, 120 frames per second or better, essentially, in order to get you 60 frames per second per eye, which will give you the best experience possible when gaming in 3D. So, so essentially you are rendering twice as many pixels as you would with a non-3D configuration. So yes, in that case, if you want to play Battlefield 3 on higher ultra settings, at 1080p in 3D, then yeah, 7970 and 7950 are going to definitely benefit you there versus, say, getting a 7770 and doing 1080p on a single display. And you'll be able to do a lot more with this GPU. I don't want anybody to think that I'm not recommending high-end cards from now on. Do I wish that the 7970 wasn't $550? Absolutely. Do I wish we saw the same amount of compression in that $300 and above price range of graphics cards that we see all the time in the $200 and below graphics card? Absolutely. We don't have it yet. Hopefully when Kepler comes out, we'll see some competition. It's possible we won't see those price drops because of the limited supply of 28 nanometer wafers. So there you go. But yeah, if you're going to do 3D gaming, then yeah, if you can afford it, the $450, $500 video cards are definitely going to show an advantage there. So again, emails podcast@pcper.com. Thank you. Keep them coming in. Let's get to our hardware software picks of the week. I'm going to go first.
You go first.
My hardware selection is hinges. There's all kinds of hinges. There's hinges on your doors.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it, actually. That's all that has.
Are there any hinges in my prenup?
Sorry, there's not.
Are there hinges on your 1U rack mount router switch thing?
There is in this one.
No, there are not.
So if you might have to pause it because it's a quick video. See it in the playlist on YouTube now. You got to go back one. So the issue is at our new office, we had this cabinet, but not a rack mount cabinet. It's only like 8 inches deep, almost 8 inches deep. So you can't really put a standard rack mount hardware in it. But we had a 24-port gigabit switch we wanted to include in there, and we didn't want it just kind of sitting at the bottom or anything like that. And it didn't have feet on it or holes on the bottom of it to mount it to like the wall with just putting screws in the wall, like if you were hanging a picture or something like that. Apparently, that's only on consumer level switches. So instead, I came up with this genius idea to
You're a genius.
I Gorilla Glued a piece of wood to the bottom of the switch because I didn't want to. If you know what I mean, because I didn't want to drill a screw directly into the switch, electronics, circuit boards, et cetera. And then I used hinges, just your standard kind of from Home Depot cabinet hinges, to then mount that board that I had glued to the switch to the back wall, and then when it's in its base
natural state.
It just kind of hangs there, right? It's in it. You can close the door and everything works fine. But then when you want to look at the lights or you want to move switches, you want to move connections around or add new connections, it's on a hinge, so you can just lift it up and look at it and monitor that. So I think
if only you could had sound when you lifted it up, you would hear. It's the slow motion sound. You don't realize this? Where have you been for the past 3 years?
I don't get it. I don't get it. But I was
Kentucky.
I'm pretty excited about that. I hate you guys. So yeah, for that piece of wood that I bought at Home Depot was 51 cents. The hinges were $2.50. And the Gorilla Glue I already had. So, by the way, Gorilla Glue, pretty strong stuff.
Web guy has it right.
What did he say?
Sideways using racks. It's been done. I've done it.
Nah, none of that stuff.
Apparently not.
All right. Well, since you're so smart, Jeremy, why don't you tell us what your pick of the week is?
Well, I really got to give a shout out to a contractor company out of the UK called Silver Sands and their Active Directories migration tool. It has been an incredibly long 10 days, but our Active Directory migration, which is going from an old growth forest to a brand new fresh tree, has probably been nowhere near as painful as it would have been without these guys. So if you've got a lot of money and you're working for a company that's going through a lot of changes and you're on a global scale, hey, I would highly recommend these guys as someone to look at. They're not expensive. They're not cheap. They're, oh my God, that was expensive. But yeah, totally worth it from what I've seen. And
right.
Thanks, guys, because otherwise it would even be longer.
Nice.
Yeah,
so
Jeremy
tired.
would have gone to Thailand for that gender,
Who says he didn't?
I would have
Who
gone anywhere to avoid
He
it.
didn't.
But no,
Josh,
I lived.
what do you got for us?
What do I got? A bunch of friends of mine.
It's
Well,
memory.
at
I'm
least
disconnected.
acquaintances. I wouldn't call them friends. You know me. They've been playing Dungeon Defenders, and they love it. And they spend hours and hours ignoring me
Yeah.
by playing this game. And you can get it on Amazon.com for $2.99.
Does it
And
require
will
an HD 7970?
Say that again?
Does it require an HD 7970?
No, something quite lower. And in fact, they
Well, no,
had
but
a
the second one's
DLC
coming out soon. It
They
might.
had a DLC out that was so expensive that you can get it for free. Or something like that. But yeah.
Is this also available on tablets?
It's
Is this what this
free
is?
for from the Android whatchamacallit.
Market?
Market. Yeah. And so it's
This is the game that
$2.99
NVIDIA demoed Tegra 2 or 3 on for the
Correct.
first time?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
for in between, PC, PS3, and Android/Tegra. So yeah,
Got
$2.99 will get you a game that will last you many, many hours, far above that of Defense Grid, which I was a big proponent of for many years and still am. So yeah, just get it. And apparently, once you get the number, you can use it on Steam. So you're good to go.
All right. Last but not least, Alan, what do you got?
So,
Come on,
this is something that
electrocute
we're actually
yourself.
gonna run up. No, I'm not going to electrocute myself. All right.
Just a little.
So this is a wall outlet called the Power 2U.
It seems like it's two people yelling that are attached at the waist.
Yeah, but are those USB attachments
Yes.
on them?
They're screaming.
Okay.
You plug
So,
something in and
They're
somebody stops
covered.
screaming.
They're hinged like Ryan's
sort
Switch.
of hinged.
They copied my Switch idea. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so you've got USB ports built into this guy.
Well, why don't you open the
And
door so we can
there's-
see him?
They're spring-loaded, actually.
Oh, they're spring-loaded. Oh,
They're
I don't
spring-loaded.
well, I guess
And the deal is
Didn't
when
think of that,
when
did
it's
you, Ryan?
first- Okay, so built into this are a pair of 2 amp USB outputs, like converters, right? So you get 5 volts, standard USB voltage, but up to 2 amps. So you can do your
Nice.
iPad 2 or any of those devices that can, use a USB 3 or 1.5 amp charging, right? This thing will give you up to 2 amps. So it's pretty much
Same
anything that
wiring
has a
from the
USB
wall?
connector. Say again?
Exact same wiring from the wall?
That's the thing, yeah. It's the wiring, the converter is all built into the back. So
Oh, now that's what I wanted to see.
a lot of nuts.
so
That's a
Josh,
lot
you're
of
never allowed to
nuts.
install one of these. Okay. So you when you open the slide connector and you plug something in, by sliding it open, that engages the power supply. So you don't have to worry about, like, if you have all, 2 USB power converters plugged in all the time, it's going to have some kind of a current draw, even if nothing is being charged or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
As long as you don't have anything plugged into these USB dock or USB plugs, it's not going to suck any more juice out of the wall than it's nothing, right? If nothing else is plugged into it, it doesn't take any power at all. So it's pretty cool. You just, slide open, plug whatever it is in.
Listen
works.
to the outlet scream.
How much
well,
are these? How much are these again?
They're like 20. It's a little further down on that page.
Holy Jeebus.
Wait, is he in trouble? Was that Morse code for SOS when he was opening those?
Help me, please, God, it hurts.
Burke,
Me and my
scroll down.
Siamese twin.
The only concern I do have on this is sometimes
You can't make toast with it?
No, sometimes the box in your wall. I mean, this is going to be kind of a tight fit,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
that's-
that's what I was thinking.
right?
Because we just took all those off when we were doing painting and all that kind of stuff, and I was thinking, I'm not sure if all those would
Yeah.
fit.
So I'm going to find this out the hard way tomorrow when
That's
I
good.
attempt to install it, and then I will write a short piece on it, and we'll see if the thing actually fits in the wall. And if not, I'll use a hammer or something. I don't know.
Is there any worry about the 2 amps being too much for certain USB devices and hurting batteries?
No,
and
they
battery
just
life?
they just draw whatever they're going to draw.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like the current is not it doesn't force 2 amps down the throat of whatever you plug in. It's just going to provide 5 volts.
It's not going to fast charge my devices either. Then. All right.
If but if the device is capable of fast charging, then it will.
I mean, don't
Which is
put it in a 20 amp socket, but still.
The only thing I worries me about that is tends to be USB charging cables are fairly short. And I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess
That's
still have the
why
same
I'm
problem.
going
Like,
to I'm going to go for the out that's just above the kitchen counter, so
Yeah.
that you just sit things on the counter there. So if you have that sort of an outlet, might be a good spot.
Yeah, maybe. All right.
The other thing I find interesting about that is it's one of the few things that will be able to charge at full speed, like your Mophie devices, little Mophie battery packs that are capable of 2 amp charging and 2 amp discharging. So that'll be good because then I'll be able to figure out just how fast.
What they
you can charge
need,
up.
what they need to make is one of those with a retractable USB cable. because otherwise I'm just going to lose
I don't know.
cables.
There's no room left, Ryan. They crammed enough in here as it is.
Make more room. I don't even make one power outlet and like 3 or 2 USB outlets and have them retractable cords. I don't know. Just an idea. Just
and
a
have
thought.
like 3 power
Free.
circuits going into it, and
for EDU,
Yeah.
all free. Exactly.
And have it on hinges.
yes.
Put it on the hinges. Yes, we put it on the hinge and the cable's inside. Boom, done. That's going to wrap up the show for this week. If you want to get in touch with us for whatever the hell reason, 1-888-38-PC-PER, toll free in the U.S. and Canada, and podcast at pcper.com is the email address for us. Please help us spread the word, the good word of this podcast, and the very good word of Josh Walrath. pcper.com /
Bad.
Yeah, don't do that, actually. pcper.com/podcast. Simple to give them the address to send them to. And then if you want to keep up to date with all of our news and reviews, make sure you go to either twitter.com/pcper or facebook.com/pcper or gplus.to/pcper. Actually, it's kind of interesting. I've been posting photos and stuff of the construction on the new office on Facebook, and we're getting a lot of good feedback that way. So we post some.
Yeah, you
some
lay a
different
nice
things.
carpet.
I do. I didn't do any of that. Thank goodness.
You didn't snack on it, did you?
Was there any pipe?
No pipe was
No.
laid or carpet was munched. You perverted people. So now that those words have been uttered on the podcast, let's close this out. We'll see you next week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm high def Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm low def Josh Walrath that matches the drapes.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
And that's more than I ever wanted to know about Josh.
I got nothing else to say.
Hmm.